Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. This is, I guess, a breaking news update on the political front, not necessarily to do with the Ukraine war at all. I was hoping to do my frontline update mapping tonight, but one of the programs I normally use, or JL myself use, to derive some of the data, I'm having some issues with, so I'm going to wait till tomorrow until I can speak to JR. In the meantime, I'm going to talk about this very pressing issue. I, as you know, am very concerned about democratic backsliding, about how nations who have oftentimes managed to accomplish a hard-won form of democracy over a long period of time, we seem to have got to a stage where the desire for power has seen those democratic institutions and processes be eroded away. We can look to places like Hungary and Viktor Orban. You can look very obviously at places like Russia. But indeed, these bulwarks of democracy, supposedly, like the US, have their own problems. And here we have a phenomenal issue at the heart of the presidency. Now, I have long said, I've written articles on this years back, but my opinion is that the real reason people vote for a president, whether they realise it or not, the real, I guess, power of voting for a president is in who they get to nominate for Supreme Court justices. So there are 9 Supreme Court justices at the moment. SCOTUS, Supreme Court of the United States. POTUS, President of the United States. So for SCOTUS, there are 9 justices. And when Trump came into power, not only did they manage to very disingenuously delay Obama's nomination of a Supreme Court justice, but then Trump managed to get 3 through the door. And this was a phenomenal success for him. He's an incredibly successful president, Trump, on account of what he managed to do with the Supreme Court, because they are the people who arbitrate the laws at the highest level in the US. And so if you want to change your ruling over abortion, you need to have your judges in the Supreme Court. If you want the Supreme Court, if you want the law of the land to favour you as a president, you need your judges in the Supreme Court. And the present makeup is 6 very, very conservative judges, some of them extremely conservative, 6 conservative judges to 3 liberal judges. And if you are a Republican, you might think that's brilliant, we're going to get all the rules to go our way. But the problem is, this can bite you on the arse. The ruling today, I think, is insane, is democratically insane. And I can't for the life of me think of any serious, anyone seriously interested in politics and democracy who would look at this and go, yeah, that's absolutely awesome, love it. So what has happened? Well, this has been reported. I mean, you all know about this already, no doubt. In a historic ruling, says Sky News, the justices said for the first time that former presidents have absolute immunity from prosecution for their official acts, but no immunity for unofficial acts. Which, although this is being reported as, in some cases there's immunity, as if this is all a nuanced decision. No, it's pretty obviously, if you're going to do something despicable in your private life, in the house or whatever, or if you go and, as a president, go and rob a liquor store, then that's not an official act on behalf of the government or, in power. So the question is, well, who gets to decide what are official acts and what are personal acts? Instead of deciding for themselves, the justices ordered lower courts to work out how to apply their decision to Trump's case. So Trump is, of course, in line to be prosecuted for a number of different offences, and this will have a huge impact on those. This is the last possible day they could have ruled on this. The Supreme Court has not only made a ruling that is actually not only what Trump wanted, but more than he wanted. So they've gone over and above what Donald Trump could have really hoped for, right? And given him everything, pretty much. But they left it as late as they possibly could, because this means that the court cases that kind of depend on these rulings get delayed even further and further. And so the idea is that Trump gets in before these cases go to court. And you have judges like Eileen Cannon, who are very legally naively making these decisions that are delaying that particular court case, and so on and so forth. So the legal system, specifically with these judges, whether they are in these lower courts or whether they are the Supreme Court judges that have been appointed by Trump, are making decisions fully in favor of Trump. So it's absolutely hilarious when you see the New York case and you've got Trump saying this is a legal system that is, being weaponized by the Democrats. And of course, it's not. It is not some kind of two-level justice system. This is a justice system that, in fact, Trump has a great deal of power over. And they are making decisions for his benefit. Now, of course, Trump came out and said, big win for the Constitution and democracy, proud to be an American. Absolute nonsense. This is a terrible win for the Constitution and for democracy. So he essentially has immunity without being prosecuted for making decisions while kind of in power. So he could order, so if he went if he was president and ordered the assassination of an opposition leader, then, for example, when in 2020, had this been in place in 2020, he could, in principle, have ordered the assassination of Joe Biden, and actually he would be immune to prosecution because this would be an official act, because he saw he saw Biden as potentially a threat to the democracy of the United States or something like that. This is absolutely incredible. It just blows my mind. So here we've got NBC News saying the Supreme Court on Monday raised the bar for prosecuting Donald Trump, ruling that he has immunity for some of his conduct as president in his federal election interference case, but maybe not for other actions, adding another obstacle for special counsel Jack Smith taking the case to trial. In a novel and potentially consequential case on the limits of presidential power, the justices voted 6-3 along ideological lines to reject Trump's broad claim of immunity, meaning the charges related to his attempts to overturn the 2020 election results will not be dismissed, but said some actions closely related to his core duties as president are off limits to prosecutors. And that is it's such a it just infuriates me. This absolutely infuriates me. In addressing, it says later, the contacts with state election officials, Roberts, so that is one of the Supreme Court justices, your main one actually, wrote that the president has, quote, broad power to speak on matters of public concern, including the conduct of elections. On the other hand, the president plays no role in the certifying of elections by states, he added. Chutkan, so that's the judge ruling in that case, needs to conduct a close analysis of the indictment to determine if Trump's actions are protected, Roberts said. In another blow to Smith, so Special Counsel Smith, who would be prosecuting that case, the court ruled that none of the conduct for which Trump is immune can be admitted as evidence at trial in any form. The court's 3 liberal justices strenuously dissented. So what happens when you make these rulings, if you dissent in a minority position, you get to write your reasons why you dissent. And my goodness, they went to town with their dissent because it's absolutely outrageous. This decision is, I would say, outrageous, and I fully agree with the dissenting opinions. So anyway, the court's 3 liberal justices strenuously dissented, with Justice Sonia Sotomayor writing that the ruling, quote, makes a mockery of the principle foundational to our constitution and system of government that no man is above the law. Because he's not above the law now. He can do, in principle, whatever he likes as long as it's if it's in official capacity, and he can't be prosecuted. It's just insane. No man is above the law apart from the main man, who is above the law. I don't understand it. Constitution, she added, does not shield a former president from answering for criminal and treasonous acts. She warned that the ruling could have broad ramifications by protecting presidents for a wide range of actions. Quote, let the president violate the law, let him exploit the trappings of office for personal gain, let him use his official power for evil ends, Sotomayor wrote. Because if he knew that he may one day face liability for breaking the law, he might not be as bold and fearless as we would like him to be. That is the majority's message today. Take the emoluments clause, right? So Trump, I think Trump should have been done for lining his own pockets while being the president of the United States and making all of these entourages and these meetings take place at his hotels, and all of the security guards and arrangements. All the security guards would be staying at his hotels, as well as the diplomats and dignitaries and so on and so forth, and just lining his pockets. And you've got all it goes on and Hatchet, and anyway, point being that I think he should have been done for that, and yet now you could argue that he would be protected from that. So you can just line your own pocket as president, as long as you're doing it in an official capacity. So that those hotels were being used, that you might have laws come into conflict with other rulings and whatnot. So I don't know, it's so murky. In a separate dissenting opinion, I'm just making sure. Yes, so in a separate dissenting opinion, Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson described the ruling as a, quote, 5-alarm fire that threatens to consume democratic self-governance. Just absolute shocker. I think I missed the end of Sotomayor's quote here, because if he knew that he may one day face liability for breaking the law, he might not be as bold and fearless as we would like him to be. That is the majority's message today, so I did say that. Even if the new proceedings do not take much time, there is little chance for a trial to conclude before Election Day. It had previously been suggested that a trial would not start until at least 3 months after the Supreme Court ruling, which would mean it would potentially not start until early October at the earliest. The trial itself could last up to 12 weeks. The case put the national spotlight on the court, which has a 6-3 Conservative majority that includes 3 justices Trump appointed. The court handed Trump an election year boost when it ruled in March that Colorado could not kick him off the ballot. So they've already been working in his favour. The justices were also criticised for their delay in taking up Trump's appeal, which some view in itself is as a victory for him, as it meant the trial could not take place in March as originally planned. I mean, it's just... Imagine if this was Biden receiving these rulings with a liberal majority set of justices, or Obama. Imagine how, if you're a Republican, how you would have been spitting at this happening, spitting with rage. And Fox News would be going insane. And yet, no. One rule for one, another for everyone else. So the justices, were criticised for delaying. Legally speaking, the case was unprecedented, as no president has ever been prosecuted after leaving office. Therefore, the court was wrestling with the legal question that had never come before it, whether a president has some form of immunity for his core duties derived from the constitutional principle of separation of powers, which delineates the powers of the presidency in relation to other branches of government. The legal argument focused on Trump's official acts, with both sides agreeing that a former president does not have immunity for personal conduct. Well, I should bloody hope that they all agreed on that one. That would be just beyond the pale. Now, I mean, you can read, the New York Times has the whole ruling here. I'm actually going to go to the first dissenting opinion here of Sotomayor. So we'll read it from pretty much the beginning. Today's decision to grant former presidents criminal immunity reshapes the institution of the presidency. It makes a mockery of the principle foundational to our constitution and system of government that no man is above the law, as we heard earlier. Relying on little more than its own misguided wisdom about the need for, quote, bold and unhesitating action by the president, ante at 3:13, the court gives former President Trump all the immunity he asked for and more, because our constitution does not shield a former president from answering for criminal and treasonous acts. I dissent. And she starts by saying, the indictment paints a stark portrait of a president desperate to stay in power. Goes on to talk about January the 6th. I'm actually going to, and it's a huge dissenting opinion, by the way. I mean, there's an awful lot to go through here. Looking at what the rationale behind the decision that the majority 6 Supreme Court justices, looking at their rationale for making that decision and finding it very much wanting. So we're going to go, you can see this, you see this is a very long dissenting opinion, and we're going to go towards the end here. There's so much I could quote from here, but yeah, let's go to the conclusion. It is really hardcore. Okay, so here we go. Right. I just got to find the right place. Give me 2 ticks. Yeah, I'm going to read a fair chunk of this from part 7 to the end. So today's decision to grant former presidents immunity for their official acts is deeply worrying. As troubling as this criminal immunity doctrine is in theory, the majority's application of the doctrine to the indictment in this case is perhaps even more troubling. In the hands of the majority, this new official acts immunity operates as a one-way ratchet. First, the majority declares all of the conduct involving the Justice Department and the Vice President to be official conduct, yet it refuses to designate any course of conduct alleged in the indictment as private, despite concessions from Trump's counsel. Trump's counsel conceded, for example, that the allegation that Trump, quote, turned to a private attorney who was willing to spread knowingly false claims of election fraud to spearhead his challenges to the election results sounds private. He likewise conceded that the allegation that Trump, quote, conspired with another private attorney who caused the filing in court of a verification signed by Trump that contained false allegations to support a challenge sounds private. Trump's counsel explaining that it is not disputed that such conduct is unofficial. Again, when asked about allegations that, quote, 3 private actors helped implement a plan to submit fraudulent slates of presidential electors to obstruct the certification proceeding, and Trump and a co-conspirator attorney directed that effort, Trump's counsel conceded the alleged conduct was private. Only the majority thinks that organising fraudulent slates of electors might qualify as an official act of the president. So this is what going beyond and saying actually they're not private, that's official, and so actually you can get away with doing that. Just incredible. Anyway, or at least an act so interrelated with other allegedly official acts that it might warrant prosecution. If the majority's sweeping conception of official acts has any real limits, the majority is unwilling to reveal them in today's decision. Second, the majority designates certain conduct immune while refusing to recognise anything as prosecutable. It shields large swaths of conduct involving the Justice Department with immunity. But it does not give an inch in the other direction. The majority admits that the vice president's responsibility presiding over the Senate is not an executive branch function. And it further admits that the president, quote, plays no direct constitutional or statutory role in the counting of electoral votes. Yet the majority refuses to conclude that Trump lacks immunity for his alleged attempts to enlist the vice president to use his ceremonial role at the January the 6th certification proceeding to fraudulently alter the election results. Instead, it worries that the prosecution for his conduct might make it harder for the president to use the vice president to advance his agenda in Congress. Such a prosecution, according to the majority, quote, may well hinder the president's ability to perform his constitutional functions. It's just insane. So they're effectively giving Trump permission, it seems to me, to make the vice president eschew his proper role and do exactly what he wants him to do, and that would be an official act. I mean, it blows my mind. Whether a prosecution for this conduct warrants immunity should have been an easy question, but the majority turns it into a debatable one. Remarkably, the majority goes further and declines to deny immunity even for the allegations that Trump organised fraudulent elector slates, pressured states to subvert the legitimate election results, and exploited violence at the Capitol to influence the certification proceedings. It is not conceivable that a prosecution for these alleged efforts to overturn a presidential election, whether labelled official or unofficial under the majority's test, would pose any, quote, dangers of intrusion on the authority and functions of the executive branch. And the majority could have said as much. Instead, it perseverates on a threshold question and should be immaterial. Looking beyond the fate of this particular prosecution, the long-term consequences of today's decision are stark. Okay, this is where it gets pretty dark. The court effectively creates a law-free zone around the president, upsetting the status quo that has existed since the founding. This new official act's immunity now, quote, lies about like a loaded weapon for any president that wishes to place his own interests, his own political survival, or his own financial gain, referring back to the Emoluments Clause, above the interests of the nation. It is freaking unbelievable. It just, honestly, I've got shivers down, I've got goosebumps now that are really bad goosebumps. This is freaking me out. The President of the United States is the most powerful person in the country and possibly the world. When he uses his official powers in any way under the majority's reasoning, he now will be insulated from criminal prosecution. Orders the Navy SEAL Team 6 to assassinate a political rival? Immune. Organises a military coup to hold onto power? Immune. Takes a bribe in exchange for a pardon? Immune. Immune, immune, immune. Let the president violate the law. Let him exploit the trappings of his office for personal gain. Let him use his official power for evil ends. Because if he knew that he may one day face liability for breaking the law, he might not be as bold and fearless as we would like him to be. That is the majority's message today. Even if these nightmare scenarios never play out, and I pray they never do, the damage has been done. The relationship between the president and the people he serves has shifted irrevocably. In every use of official power, the president is now a king above the law. Hallmarks reference to 1776 here. You guys in the US got your independence from a monarchy, and by goodness, you seem to want it back. I can't believe this has happened. Just finally for Sotomayor, the majority's single-minded fixation on the president's need for boldness and dispatch ignores the countervailing need for accountability and restraint. The framers were not so single-minded in the Federalist Papers after, quote, endeavouring to show that the executive designed by the Constitution, quote, combines all the requisites to energy. Alexander Hamilton asks a separate, equally important question. Does it also combine the requisites to safety? In a Republican sense, a due dependence on the people, a due responsibility? The answer then was yes, based in part upon the president's vulnerability to prosecution in the common course of law. The answer after today is no. Never in the history of our republic has a president had reason to believe that he would be immune from criminal prosecution if he used the trappings of his office to violate the criminal law. Moving forward, however, all former presidents will be cloaked in such immunity. If the occupant of that office misuses official power for personal gain, the criminal law that the rest of us must abide will not provide a backstop. With fear for our democracy, I dissent. And Justice Jackson also dissents too. I will just read the conclusion and the very beginning here. The beginning Justice Sotomayor has thoroughly addressed the court's flawed reasoning and conclusion as a matter of history, tradition, law, and logic. So what I didn't read to you were all the reasons why actually the majority were completely unjustified in the rationale that they use. I mean, it is quite a blistering takedown, to be honest. Or I skim read it, but some of the parts I read more closely, and it was just like, yeah, Sotomayor went to town. I agree with every word of her powerful dissent. I write separately to explain as succinctly as I can the theoretical nuts and bolts of what exactly the majority has done today to alter the paradigm of accountability for presidents of the United States. I also address what that paradigm shift means for our nation moving forward. Yes, so as I said, I'm now going to go to the end, however. Another fairly sizable dissenting opinion, but not as long as Sotomayor, because obviously Sotomayor did most of the legwork there. For my part, okay, no, we'll go here. To the extent that the majority's new accountability paradigm allows presidents to evade punishment for their criminal acts while in office, the seeds of absolute power for presidents have been planted. And this is it, the seeds of absolute power. This is your movement towards authoritarianism. This is a democratic backsliding. And I challenge anyone to tell me otherwise and be justified in that. Like if you're a big fan of the GOP and a big fan of Trump, if Biden did this, you would be screaming. This is democratic backsliding. This gives the president more power. It is undoubtedly the case that the president now has more power, is immune from being held accountable for doing, I would say, heinous things in an official capacity. And without a doubt, absolute power corrupts. Absolutely. Quote, if one man can be allowed to determine for himself what is law, every man can. That means first chaos, then tyranny. End quote. Likewise, quote, if the government becomes a lawbreaker, it breeds contempt for law. It invites every man to become a law unto himself. It invites anarchy. And there's reference to previous writings there. End quote. I worry that after today's ruling, our nation will reap what this court has sown. Stated simply, the court has now declared for the first time in history that the most powerful official in the United States can, under circumstances yet to be fully determined, become a law unto himself. As we enter this uncharted territory, the people, in their wisdom, will need to remain ever attentive, consistently fulfilling their established role in our constitutional democracy and thus collectively serving as the ultimate safeguard against any chaos spawned by the court's decision. For, like our democracy, our constitution is, quote, the creature of their will and lives only by their will. End quote. For my part, I simply cannot abide the majority's senseless discarding of a model of accountability for criminal acts that treats every citizen of this country as being equally subject to the law, as the rule of law requires. That core principle has long prevented our nation from devolving into despotism. Yet the court now opts to let down the guardrails of the law for one extremely powerful category of citizen. Any future president who has the will to flout Congress's established boundaries. In short, America has traditionally relied on the law to keep its presidents in line. Starting today, however, Americans must rely on the courts to determine whether, if at all, the criminal laws that their representatives have enacted to promote individual and collective security will operate as speed bumps to presidential action or reaction. Once self-regulating, the rule of law now becomes the rule of judges, with courts pronouncing which crimes committed by a president have to be let go and which can be redressed as impermissible. So ultimately, this court itself will decide whether the law will be any barrier to whatever course of criminality emanates from the Oval Office in the future. The potential for great harm to American institutions and Americans themselves is obvious. The majority of my colleagues seem to have put their trust in our court's ability to prevent presidents from becoming kings through case-by-case application of the indeterminate standards of their new presidential accountability paradigm. I fear that they are wrong. But for all our sakes, I hope that they are right. In the meantime, because the risks and power the court has now assumed are intolerable, unwarranted, and plainly antithetical to bedrock constitutional norms, I dissent. Just crazy. And just finally, 5 takeaways CNN, or a number of takeaways CNN has from this historic decision. So first of all, Trump got a bigger win than expected. In several key respects, Trump got what he wanted from the 6-3 court and more. The court ruled that for core presidential activity, Trump has the absolute immunity he had sought. The majority said to Trump that Trump's conversations with the Justice Department, his effort to try to get officials on board with his effort to overturn the election, were covered with absolute immunity. I mean, that's the point here. He can speak to those people, get them to overturn the election in different states, get them to find me those votes. And that is fine. He's immune. He can do that. That's cool. Hey, you can do that. Is it cool then if Biden does that this time round? Are you all cool with that? Are you fine with Biden just demanding that people find him the votes in case Trump actually wins the election in November? Are they making a rod for their own back here? I don't think Biden would do that, but potentially he now can. For other official actions and more routine powers held by the president, the court said there is at least some immunity, and it largely deferred to lower courts to sort that out. That's a process that could take weeks or even months. So that then goes in Trump's favour. Okay, what's next in the federal case against Trump? I'm sort of skipping on here. With the justice giving the lower court some limited guidance, the next steps are likely to be more hearings, written arguments, and even proceedings and witness testimony and debates over evidence before US District Judge Tanya Chutkan in Washington, D.C. This is just more and more delay, of course, which again benefits Trump. And next point here is liberals tear into the majority for creating a king above the law. So those dissenting opinions we have heard, at least to some degree. And then Trump's nominee Barrett. So this is Justice Amy Coney Barrett, actually wanted a swift trial, and she's not got what she wanted. She said, I would have framed the underlying legal issues differently. She suggested that because Trump's wholesale challenge to the indictment had failed, at least some of the case could go forward. The Conservative justice wrote that, quote, a president facing prosecution may challenge the constitutionality of a criminal statute as applied to official acts alleged in the indictment. If that challenge fails, however, he must stand trial, Barrett wrote. The justice took issue with how the court had ruled that evidence from Trump's official acts should be excluded from the trial, writing that there was no reason to depart from the familiar and time-tested procedure that would allow for such evidence to be included. So she actually disagreed with the fact that they can't use some of that evidence now. And that this is now going to be in place for posterity. This is not just for Trump, although I think it was done for Trump, but any president going forward, and one would assume even Biden right now, would be able to get up to no good in the position as president and be immune for that if it's on kind of official business. And then even Justice Thomas, in his concurrence, said that, so he was one of the majority, he should have been recused from all sorts. So, oh my goodness, don't get me into Clarence Thomas and his wife, who, he shouldn't have even been taking part in this, but there you go. He has said that Attorney General Merrick Garland has violated the Constitution when he appointed Smith as a special counsel. So it's even like, it's like Trump. Here's a president, but actually here's another president. Because hey, we love you, and you can do anything you like. It's fine as long as you don't, do me over as part of your official activities. One loss for Trump is that impeachment isn't a legal shield. So that is addressing Trump's claim. Roberts wrote that a president who evades impeachment for one reason or another, such as by resigning from office before an impeachment proceeding got underway, would never be held accountable for his criminal acts. Impeachment is a political process by which Congress can remove the president, Roberts wrote. Transforming the political process into a necessary step in the enforcement of criminal law finds little support in the text of the Constitution or the structure of our government. So, in other words, he can be impeached. So Trump had argued that he should be immune from prosecution since he was previously impeached and acquitted by the Senate, therefore creating a double jeopardy situation. But that argument is seen to have no merit. But basically, Trump has had an absolute, all his Christmases have come at once today, and essentially his appointed Supreme Court have done his bidding. And the lower courts are at the moment, well, certainly Eileen Cannon in the documents case is doing his bidding. It's an absolute travesty for democracy. This it just blows my mind. Anyway, that's enough for me. Thanks for listening. Take care. Speak soon.